You know, we've all been there. You make a plan, you have the absolute best intentions, but then when the moment actually arrives, you do the complete opposite. So why? Why is there this huge gap between what we want to do and what we actually end up doing? Well, in this explainer, we're going to dig into why that happens, and you might be surprised to find out that the answer has very little to do with willpower at all.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll put a name to the problem, the intention-action gap. Then, we'll get into the common traps our minds set for us and why our willpower feels like a battery that's always low. And, most importantly, we're going to finish up with some practical ways to build systems that actually work with your brain instead of constantly fighting against it. Okay, first up, our good intentions gap. This is all about that universal struggle between making the plan and actually following through. And the most important thing to get right off the bat is that this is not some personal failure. It's a fundamentally human thing. We all deal with it. I mean, come on, does this sound familiar? You set that alarm, you've got this crystal clear goal in your head, you are convinced that tomorrow is the day. But then, when that alarm goes off, the immediate comfort of just 5 more minutes in bed totally wins out. That one little moment, that's the perfect window into the problem we're talking about today.
And there's actually a name for this. Psychologists call it the intention-action gap. It's that really frustrating space between the person we intend to be and the person who actually shows up in the moment. It's the battlefield where our long-term goals for our health, or our career, or learning something new get completely ambushed by our brain's desire for what feels good right now.
So, what's actually causing this gap? Let's talk about the software bugs in our thinking. Think of these as kind of like the default settings in our brain that can seriously and quietly sabotage even our best-laid plans. One of the biggest, most common traps is what's called all-or-nothing thinking. It's this cognitive distortion that just forces us into a totally false choice. Either it's perfect or it's a complete failure. There are no shades of gray. You either do something perfectly or you get this feeling like, well, you might as well have not done it at all. And this is what's so wild. You see this thinking pop up everywhere in real life. Just look at the health goals row. You eat one cookie, and what does your brain immediately say? Well, the diet is blown for today, might as well eat the whole box. It's the same thing at work, right? You make one tiny mistake on a project and suddenly your brain is telling you the entire thing is garbage. That balanced alternative, that progress matters more than perfection, man, that is so much more powerful and way more sustainable.
Okay, the second mental trap is called present bias. This is our brain's built-in, hardwired preference for now over later. It's why we choose that small, immediate reward, like, scrolling on our phone, over a much bigger reward that's further down the road, like the incredible feeling of relief you'd get from finishing a big project way ahead of schedule. Our brain just values what's right in front of its nose.
And this quote from the economist David Lifeson just nails it. When we're planning for our future, we always imagine our future self making the smart, virtuous choice. But as soon as that future becomes the present, our bias for what feels good right now completely takes over. And poof, there go our plans. That's the gap in action, right there. Okay, so we've looked at the software bugs. But what about the hardware itself? Is our willpower actually a finite resource? Is our brain running on a limited battery that just gets drained as the day goes on? Well, this brings us to a really fascinating concept called ego depletion. The whole theory here suggests that self-control isn't just about making a choice. It's more like a muscle. Every time you use it to resist that piece of cake, to focus on a really boring task, to make a tough decision, you're using up a limited mental resource. And that makes it even harder to use that muscle for the next thing.
Now, it's super important to be clear here. This idea is still pretty heavily debated among scientists. As you can see, there are some real challenges to the theory, including some big studies that failed to replicate the original findings. But there's also a huge body of evidence that supports it, with hundreds of successful replications. The thinking is that many of the failures were maybe due to weak experimental setups. So while the science is still figuring it out, the core idea of mental fatigue is still really, really influential.
And honestly, you can see the real-world impact of this kind of mental fatigue everywhere. In sports, being mentally drained actually hurts your physical performance. The workplace example is just wild. Studies have shown that judges are way more likely to give out harsher sentences later in the day. It's called decision fatigue. And in our own lives, being depleted can lead to more arguments and conflict, which of course just depletes us even more. It's a vicious cycle.
So, here's the crucial point. If our brains have these built-in software traps and our hardware runs on a limited battery, then just trying harder is a recipe for failure.
And that brings us to the solution. We have to start building a smarter system, a system that works with our brain's quirks, not against them.
A huge piece of that puzzle is understanding the massive difference between intensity and consistency. This slide explains it perfectly. Intensity is that big, one-time, high-effort thing, like going to the dentist for a deep cleaning. But consistency, that's the small, daily habit of brushing your teeth. With consistency, missing one day doesn't wreck everything, because what really matters is the accumulation over the long run.
So how do we actually do this? Well, here's a simple little toolkit for fighting back against those mental traps. To take on that all-or-nothing thinking, try these 3 things. Instead of calling a presentation a total disaster, rate its success on a scale from 0 to 100%. My personal favorite is the best friend test. Just ask yourself, what would I tell my best friend if they were in this exact situation? Because we are always so much kinder and more realistic with our friends than we are with ourselves.
And that brings us to our final section, designing your success. This is all about taking everything we've just learned, all the quirks and limitations of our own brains, and actually using that knowledge to create systems and mindsets that lead to real, sustainable growth.
This slide just illustrates that shift in mindset so brilliantly. I mean, look at these reframes. The thought, my business is a complete failure, is just paralyzing. But changing that to, my business is facing challenges that I'm learning to navigate, well, that opens the door for you to actually take action and learn something. This isn't just about positive thinking. It is a fundamental shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. It's about giving yourself permission to be a work in progress, and that is what turns a roadblock into a learning opportunity.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. What if we all just stopped blaming ourselves for not having enough willpower? What if the real key to reaching our goals isn't about gritting our teeth and trying harder, but about understanding our own minds and designing a smarter and, frankly, a more compassionate system for our own success?